Nice to catch up with you, Lutz. So
Chris, is, as always, is awesome.
this is a new experiment for us today in the way we are engaging the audience. And oftentimes when we talk, we just deliver a presentation and then say thank you, any Q&As where no one asks any questions. But today we thought just to inspire that we're going to be questioning each other. So we have no idea how this is going to turn out. Bear with us, enjoy it, chip in, and off we go. So, any questions?
Not to start with. Just not sure how close the mic has to be held for everybody to hear me. Is this good? Better? All right, excellent.
Anyway, today's topic is a topic that is very, very close to our heart. Essentially, it is about the elements of passive design, where we borrow traditional ideas from the past and how we embed it into Masdar City. And so we, at the very, very last moment, decided that we needed some slides because we thought we had to have some slides to attract people. I'm not so sure if that's such a great idea because I'm sitting here, backlit. I mean, can you actually...
Hence I turned.
Yeah. Can you actually see me? Just because I can
Because
see
we can
you.
stand if it's easier
Right.
for everybody.
So I feel as though we're the audience and you're the one who's in the show. So, clicker. Thank you. Clicker. Masdar City. Always start off with, has everyone here been to Masdar City? Who hasn't?
Hands up. Who's not been to Masdar City?
Everyone's been to Masdar City. Great. So I don't need to explain too much what Masdar City is about because that itself is a really long story. It's talking about it's a community, it's a social development, it's a mixed-use community, it's a business hub, it's an innovation hub, it's a tech hub, it's major sports facilities, walking, jogging tracks, family arena. Everything has that a city has to offer. And if you were here for previous sessions, our dear colleagues went through that at depth of what Masdar City is and what we have done. But today we'll go straight into how has the past impacted what we're doing today at Masdar City. Spot the similarity? Yes, Masdar City is a copy of the past. In fact, this is Shibam in Yemen. It's a 1,700-year-old city. Most of the buildings you see on there were built about 400-500 years ago. But in there are lessons. And this was an image that was proposed to us by the original master plan of Masdar City, Foster and Partners, as a way of thinking about cities ground up. And you see the denseness and compactness of this. And there are other cities that has similar lessons to tell us. And so these are lessons about compact design. These are about lessons about walkability. These are lessons about shaded streets, shaded public realms. These are also buildings built at a time when there was no air conditioning. So sizes of openings were important. They wanted to let light in, but not so large where they were letting too much heat, especially in this region. So through series of trial and error, they got the size of window down to a fine art, that balance between keeping heat out and letting light in. And that is a very important lesson for us, how we design our buildings today at Masdar City. Even though we do have air conditioning, but the principle still applies. I mean, we actually had one design proposal put to us with full height glass windows, right? And we said, how can this be sustainable? They said, it's LEED platinum. But I said, you got full height glass. Yes, but we ticked all the boxes, we did the scoring, and we've got a LEED platinum building. It works. So turning back to the past and looking at things behind us, we asked a very simple question. How would you design this building, or would you make the same design proposal if you had no air conditioning? Let's say we're a greedy developer. We value engineered the air conditioning out of the system. Right? How would you do it? Would you propose this? Obviously, the answer is, of course not. Then we said, well, then why did you do this? So please rethink. Imagine you're designing the same brief, right, but without air conditioning, and see what happens. So they came back after a period of time, redrew the whole thing, and first thing I had to do was figure out what to do with the windows. And suddenly this building came back with much heavier walls, bigger walls, windows, and it started to look like something from the past. And we were so happy with it that we said, we'll give you back the value engineered out air conditioning. But it's an air conditioning that has to do much, much less work.
Chris, just on that, and I think it's an important point to mention, at Masdar City, we don't just want to tick boxes. So although we strive to achieve high ratings, for instance, in platinum, LEED Platinum, or WELL certification, or STDAMA Pearl, we fundamentally believe we need to apply good design principles, first and foremost, which are then complemented by the associated ratings. So, Chris, please continue.
But at the same time, we do tick all the boxes.
At the same time, unfortunately, at times...
But we do so much more.
We do so much more. That's what I like to think. It's not just about the boxes,
okay,
but it is about exceeding expectations,
what?
Value creation for the environment. Thumbs up.
Did you catch that? And so when you put all this together, thank you for the interruption. I mean, it wasn't even Q&A yet.
You're more than welcome.
So this idea of traditional city idea has been put into the modern setting, right? In the past, it was an art, but in modern days, it's a science. Here behind me is some thermal images of Masdar City compared to Khalifa Street in downtown Abu Dhabi. And I think the images are self-explanatory, right? And this is what we aspire to optimize at Masdar City, how to use city fabric based on traditional ideas to make the outdoor area as comfortable as possible. So when you hear people saying, oh, Masdar City is 10 degrees cooler than your typical city, yes and no. The air temperature is not 10 degrees cooler. Air temperature is air temperature that never changes. But it's the felt temperature. When you have your iPhone weather apps and you just scroll to the bottom, right at the bottom, it tells you what is the felt temperature. And that is a function of shade, of wind movement, of radiation reflecting from your buildings. So there's a whole science to it. And that's what we are dealing with here. And these images here very clearly show where that temperature difference is coming from. So transposing that into a modern medium, I'd like to let my colleague take over a little bit and talk about a new project now and how the old project has directed what we're doing today. Over to you.
Thank you, Chris. I'll get the clicker as well.
Wow. You get a clicker.
Well, as Chris
Enjoy
has already
while you can.
said, and fundamentally what is important and what differentiates us from other environmental developers is that we look at passive measures first and foremost, where others look at technology to save, or should we say solve, some of the challenges that we face in the region. We look at architecture of the past, we look at what works and what is regionally fit for purpose. What do I mean by regionally fit for purpose? Is we have a lot of, for instance, international architects that come to the Middle East and they replicate what they've replicated in Europe or in America or in Asia. Now, as we know, we have very unique climatic conditions here. So we need a response that is more regionally fitting.
Any architects in the audience?
Good thing, because I was just about to go architect bashing. So what we...
Yeah, that wasn't a health warning, by the way.
So what we ask our consultants to do is work in a manner in which we embrace the local context. So we embrace in terms of where we are and how do we respond to that. So we don't respond in a way that is typically accustomed to, for instance, in an international way, for instance, towers of glass and steel, as Chris has just mentioned. So although those are very useful materials, we have to use them sparingly. Also, we have to look at what is the carbon footprint of those materials. And as we know, carbon footprint in glass, as an example, has got a high carbon footprint. So we need to look at that as well. So we look at how we approach a building design holistically. Now, that doesn't mean it's perfect, and that doesn't mean there's not room for improvement. So we continuously look at what opportunities exist to improve upon what we did previously. So the project you see in front of you here is what we call MC Squared. It is a project that was quite recently designed. It's under construction at the moment. And if everything goes according to plan, we will be completed by the end of the year. So just to go through some of the environmental ratings that we are achieving, the scheme will achieve LEED Platinum. It will achieve WELL Gold. It will achieve Pearl 4. And we have a net zero energy building on there as well, which is the
excuse
HQ
me.
building.
So you do like ticking boxes?
On occasion. It's just bragging rights that I'm rattling off right now. But the scheme is about so much more. It's not just about, as Chris has just said, ticking the boxes. It's also about what are we doing for society? What are we doing for mankind? What are we doing in terms of placemaking? What are we doing for people? At the end of the day, cities are about people. So we have to create spaces for people where they want to spend time, where they feel comfortable, where they want to socialize and communicate. So our philosophy is not just one of that we respond in terms of environmental conditions, that our schemes are commercially viable, which they all are, but that we also tick the box. Chris, tick the box. In terms of social, so that when you come to Masdar City, you feel comfortable. You want to spend time there, and you want to hopefully move there as time goes on. So the scheme you see behind me is a commercial scheme. It's not a residential scheme. So those are all commercial offerings that we have there. It's already pre-leased. A year before end of construction, it's already fully leased. So people who use the argument in saying that that sustainable architecture is not commercially viable, I hate to say it, you're wrong. It's very viable. We have no free space at Masdar City. All our offerings are taken up before they're even completed. So why am I saying that? Because I'm saying that at the end of the day, this is what we want everybody else to replicate. It doesn't help us just doing it. We want others to follow. We want others to do what we're doing and do it better than what we're doing it. So when people say, for instance, a new sustainable city is being designed, are we upset about that? Of course, we're not upset about that. In fact, we encourage it. We're delighted that others are taking on that role and that they're looking to hopefully compete with us and hopefully do better than what we have done, although I doubt it, but they can try. Let them try. At the end of the day, it's putting that forward and throwing the mantle out there, and that's why we say a blueprint, for others to follow. So to give you a little bit of background on the scheme itself, it was designed very much along the lines of what Chris had outlined. We gave the brief to the architects or to the consultants to design something, a scheme that was a response to the context in which it sits. So in other words, it's part and parcel of Masdar City, right? And how do we build onto what we have already done? The legacy part was extremely successful, but how do we build on that? And how do we move it forward? And how do we exceed what had been done previously? And how do we showcase that this is a commercially viable scheme at the same time? So the architects were challenged in a competition to come up with the scheme. This particular scheme was the winning scheme, which is called MC Squared, which was done by Woods Bagot. They responded extremely well to the challenges that we set them, and hence you see the design that you see before you. Chris, I don't know if you have anything to add at this point in time.
I think you just gave them a bit of information overdose.
Oh, In that case, please help us out. So I don't know what the next slide brings, but let me click on it anyway. Now, the building you see in front of you is what is our net zero energy building. So people who say, for instance, that, again, environmental architecture cannot be stunning, I think we're here to challenge that. This is a net zero energy building, LEED Platinum, again, Pearl 4, and WELL Gold. It's also Wire Score Gold as well that we achieved in it, which is a recent rating that we had achieved. This building is, I think, a very handsome structure, at the same time a very practical structure and a very efficient structure. What you see in front of you is a canopy that goes over the building, which is a PV array, which helps us with the net zero energy rating for the building. So for those of you who are not familiar with the term of net zero energy, basically the building produces as much energy as it uses. In fact, this particular building creates a surplus. So there's actually more energy than it uses. The reason why we did that is, again, because we cannot always control exactly the amount of energy a tenant will use. We are allowed for some surplus in there as well to ensure that we meet the sustainable criteria that we set out to do.
So I just want to add that that net zero energy balance is all very, very well to get any building, and if you add enough PV to it, you can make it net zero energy. The issue is why buildings don't do this is because you have to add so much PV, it becomes an impractical proposition. And that's where this passive design part comes into it. It really just starts off of figuring out a way to absolutely, as far as possible, minimize your energy requirement in the first place, right? So your building has to work effectively without the PV. It's a very energy efficient building without the PV, and the PV is just a top up of what you do need to use.
Absolutely, as Chris said, and I think that's a pivotal item, is to reduce the energy amount, you have to make that building work very, very hard. Which also means, again, in terms of glazing, you use glazing for its functional purpose, to bring in light into the building. But at the same time, you want to minimize the amount of glazing you have, because glass in its own right is not the best, or it has not got the best thermal properties. Although we have got triple glazing on the building, it's still not as good as the solid parts of the building that you see. So the building on average, our average buildings have about a split of between 30 to 70% wall to glazing ratio. That we have found to be optimum. Because of the WELL ratings, and this is where the balance comes into play, is WELL is all about the social aspects of how comfortable is a building to the end user. Because at the end of the day, we want to create environments where people want to spend time. So the point being is, how do we, especially in light of after COVID, as we all know, employers are struggling at the moment to bring their staff back into the office. So we need to create environments that are stimulating for people. We need to create environments where people want to be a part of. So at the end of the day, these buildings are vitally important in ensuring that we create environments where people want to be, coming back to the social aspect. It's also in terms of how we design the buildings. I don't believe we have a floor plate. Do we have a floor plate? You put these slides together. Oh, it was Amy. So the fundamental point in terms of internal circulation, as an example, is that we always utilize the staircase to be the focal point of the building. So when you walk into this particular building, the HQ building, or even the other buildings, you will always have sight of the staircase first and foremost. In most buildings, if you walk in, you will notice you face the elevators, right? What do elevators do? Elevators basically use energy, right? So what we want to try and do is, first and foremost, it's good to encourage movement. Staircase, all of those of you who do staircase climbing, it's awesome exercise, right? But also it's a social aspect, because people are coming down in the staircase and you're going up. So it's a chance to meet people on that route. So in the HQ building, what we've even done, we've created social spaces around the staircase, so that on your way up, you meet somebody, you have an opportunity to have a cup of coffee, sit down, and even have a chat. So the point being is engaging with people that are in that building themselves and allowing them to interact with people that are sharing their space. So it's another important part of our building design. So it's not just about the internal, it's not just about the envelope, but it's also the flow of the building itself. I'm exhausted, Chris. Jump in.
You're doing such a great job. Great job. But I'm just looking at the image behind me, and I keep going back to the first images that we showed. I mean, that is the starting point. You see the densities here, and even in the slide before, what is in there that you commonly do not see today is this buildings being close together and the encouragement of walkability. In fact, do you now to go back on the slide one step, the red button?
Red button.
Does it? Yeah. You see, that inspiration from the past about connecting buildings, connecting people. And in our case here, it goes one step even further from a business point of view, because the building on the right-hand side, yeah, is the edge of the International Renewable Energy Agency building, IRENA. And they share the building with the Emirates Nuclear Energy Corporation. Right? So you've got nuclear and renewable energy in the same building. The MC Square HQ has been taken already. And at COP28, we announced that the tenant that is going to be moving in upon completion is the Abu Dhabi Department of Energy. So you have Abu Dhabi Department of Energy, IRENA, Emirates Nuclear Energy Corporation, and there, even from a fabric point of view, is our contribution to create energy transition, because they also happen to be 1 minute's walk from each other as well. Right? No excuse for not talking to each other. And so, it's again looking back into the past, looking back at tradition and traditional cities is about communication. It's transforming that into a modern medium. And although we are technically so much more advanced than what we had past, but the elements that make the city work are still age-old ideas of people, face-to-face interaction and communication and community building.
And I think your key word there is community. The scheme is about building a community. So on the side is, for instance, what we have in this scheme, or at the heart of the scheme is where we have the social facilities. As an example, instead of every building having its own prayer facility, we've centralized the prayer facility so that we have one prayer facility for everybody to utilize. The same goes for food and beverage. We've stayed clear of providing kitchenettes, for instance, in the individual buildings and made a central hub. So people interact, people engage, people get to meet one another, people get to socialize, and building on that community. I just want to take a step back because I also think it's an important part. Is, you know, when we started with this idea.
Clicker, please.
Oh, sorry.
Since you don't like using it.
Takes the keys away from me. I can't believe it. The point I would make is, as well, when we originally started with the scheme and we started with various experts in the field to advise us, to basically give us some assurance that this was a viable proposition, that our approach was going to be commercially viable, they actually said it wouldn't be. We were told this is not going to be a viable scheme. We were told this is not going to work. Now, as I just said, we have it leased out at top rentals for great returns. So the point I would make is sometimes you need to be brave. And to use my little cliche, I apologize in advance for using that, is you've got to put your big boy trousers on sometimes to move things forward, right? And this is, I think, is part and parcel. It's about a mindset. We've got to change mindset. We've got to be prepared to embrace something new. We've got to be prepared to look at something boldly and step forward. And I think this scheme, if I were to summarize it in that sense, is a step forward and that we're now building on. And this has been a fundamental point for us on which now we can show the success of this scheme and that we can now build on the next scheme. And I think sometimes that's absolutely critical.
Q&A.
Who has the first question?
Damn it, I wasn't done.
You're on a roll. We need to control the time.
No questions?
No.
Guys,
Let's see what the next slide looks like.
what's the next slide? Oh, that's
Whoa.
about people.
More people. Lots of people.
The what do you see about? Oh, go back. I want to talk about the. I'll let you talk to the slide, Chris.
This is a kind of summary. I think many people have seen this diagram before, but it's a diagram that we still hold close to our heart about how we think about the buildings and its relationship of design, the role of traditional design and passive design, and how it relates to the cost of construction. Everything is tied together, and one does need a holistic understanding of these various components to bring about what we are aspiring to do and actually are doing by putting concrete into the ground.
Carbon-friendly concrete.
Deep green carbon-friendly concrete.
Very green concrete.
And so just to kind of link this to the commerciality, oftentimes we are asked or we are told by people that people say, we like what you do at Masdar City, but we cannot afford to do what you do. And with our minor bit of sense of humor, we love responding to this comment by simply saying, are you telling me you cannot afford to make money? Because Masdar City is a wholly owned company of the Mubadala investment company. So everything we do has an investment benchmark. That is an advantage and disadvantage at the same time. But on the long run, it means that what we do is repeatable and commercially viable, and therefore qualifies as a green print of how we can build in the future. We work with the same set of regulations, same set of codes, same constraints as everyone else. And at one time we did look at, or we were given an opportunity to rewrite the codes for ourselves, but we eventually moved away from that, knowing that wasn't the way forward if we intended to create a model that can be replicated by others.
And that's not to say we don't have our challenges with the authorities. A lot of what we do is pushing the boundaries. So we do have to be prepared to invest time and effort in engaging with the authorities to ensure that they understand what our approach to something is, which does mean an investment of time. So the one thing I would say that one does need is to be prepared to invest time into these schemes, because yes, if you are pushing the boundaries, you will need to allow for the adequate time.
Since there's not many questions, I'll share with you a very, very simple model about how to think about the bottom one, shape, mass, and orientation. It's a very simple idea, which is imagine that you are asked to design a 4 square meter building. 1, 2, 3, 4. You got just a box with a cross in the middle. And if that was your floor plan, then you can clearly say it's a 2 by 2 square. So the length of the perimeter is 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, 8, right? And that length of perimeter to us is a function from an environmental point of view of how much heat you let into the building, because that's the surface area of the building. Now, you could actually redesign that building with 4 squares in a line, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is also 4 square meters, right? However, if there are 4 squares in a line, then the perimeter is then 4 plus 1 plus 4 plus 1. That's 10. So immediately, if you opted for a long, thin building, then you would be letting in more heat. Our approach is to change the 10 into the 8, reduce it by 2, which is a cost saving, which also reduces the energy requirement, which is a cost saving. So just as kind of a simple model, there's double cost saving in trying to produce something that is more energy efficient. And therefore, that is a very simple example to us of how sustainability can actually save you money. And what we try to do is find these type of features and apply it through the various levels as we go up this design. And so Lutz and I, had an incredible fun time solving this puzzle over these years. You can see he's worse in the office,
We
by
love
the way.
to solve puzzles.
No, but seriously, we do really enjoy our time kind of working on this because it works on a personal level, works at the company level, and it works on a regional and global level. And I think you can tell where I will go on a tangent now. You know, personal needs and aspirations, a job worth getting out of bed for in the morning and contributing to bigger purpose. They're so cliche, but they are there
So
at Masdar
important,
City.
so important.
So I'm not going to put you on the spot to be on the microphone, but I'm going to come around and ask every one of you what your one takeaway was from this conversation. And I may or may not share it with you.
It's like getting a book review.
We have 2 questions. You had the first one.
Hello. Yes. First of all, thank you very much for sharing this amazing experience. And I have tried in the past few times to attend a seminar on different places. Didn't make it. So this is the first time I have to see. Sustainable city is a very, very hard goal, especially from the passive architecture point of view. And I think you guys did a top level work and still pushing ahead after 15 years. In my personal view, I think you're among the best of the best in the world. And congratulations achieved so far. Yeah.
Thank you, it's very kind.
Yeah, seriously. We're working with Masdar City. We'll be happy to be part of towards the achieve the goal, accelerate that. My question is this: the sustainable living is a general goal, where it's a final goal. So from the passive design point of view, from all I know, I'm not a professional architect, but I've seen many of those things, and I think this is the masterpiece for all I see in this very tough environment. So, but my question is this: in this tough environment, towards the final sustainability or sustainable living goal in terms of the communities, 5 square kilometers, and sort of quantitatively, from the past design point of view, how many percentage they can help achieve the goal. It's a then what's the, because you have a pyramid, right? Then how much left for the rest, which can be, as you said, becomes commercially viable. So eventually we can achieve the final goal of sustainable living in this land. Yeah.
Chris has got this one.
So if I understand your question properly, you're saying that part of the city is sustainable to carry parts of the city that may not be as sustainable, and what is the percentage? Okay, I get it. Right. You need to come to my next presentation this afternoon. I have the numbers there, but we have found out. Okay, we have found out that in a net zero energy building, right, from 0 to 100, somewhere between 40 to 50% saving out of that 100% can be achieved from the passive design, supplemented by high performance equipment, 40 to 50%, and that is measured from our existing portfolio depending on the building type, and then the remaining 50% is what you need to do to get to all the way to net zero with renewable energy.
Thank you so much. Just before I go to your question, I promise a couple more thoughts. What were your takeaways?
Localized and context-aware approaches to design.
Commercially viable, still sustainable, and
Very sustainable.
amazing design. Amazing design.
Oh, you
Thank
have
you.
just
Thank you. My head's
amazing
gonna just
design,
fall off
particularly
my-
on MC squared. Yes, if it was a huggy toy, he could hug it every night. Loves it. Okay.
Come here for her.
Hi. Sorry, that's a bit loud. Thanks, that was also great. My question is, you mentioned that you'd like Masdar to be an example, a benchmark of what can be done. Are there any other cities or developments in the world that are emulating parts or all of what you're doing? And if there are, what would you say is the one key tangible learning outcome that you've had from Masdar that you've been able to share with them?
I think one of the items I would say, and that's a challenge I think that we face globally, is we had a delegation from one of the cities come, and their biggest challenge was to get the idea into the ground. So their biggest difficulty were they were running in a loop in terms of trying to get it perfect. So they were continuously designing with all the experts, but they couldn't get a consensus in terms of how do we get it into the ground? How do we start? And I think what we've got to recognize is that perfection doesn't exist. Perfection is something we strive towards. So my response was, you've got to start somewhere. You've got to be prepared to say, we have to draw the line and we are now going to build. And the next project, you take the learnings out of that and then you apply those learnings in the next project. And then you take the learnings out of that and you apply them in your next project. And I think it is imperative to reiterate, it is about taking the first step, and baby steps forward is what people, to my mind, what people are trying to do is they're trying to do it all in one step. And that, to my mind at least, it doesn't allow for itself. It is because you will have compromises along the route. Not everybody is going to agree with everybody. So if you like, the certain experts in terms of, let's say, the structural engineer, the civil engineer, the architect, as I said earlier, the ratings that you're looking to achieve, there are compromises, fire, life and safety. So there are always going to be some compromises that have to be reached. So to my mind and in my experience, baby steps. One step, take it forward. One step, take it forward, and learn from that. And this is to the point of learning. It's also one of the criticisms that we faced was, well, why aren't you developing everything in one go? Because if we did everything in one go, we wouldn't be learning. So the point is, every project that we do builds on the last project. And hopefully we do better and better and better and come as close as we can to, in inverted commas, perfection, which doesn't exist, by the way. But we come closer and closer.
Speaking of closer with the microphone, please.
Roger that.
Yeah, I think this transition journey part is very important. I mentioned that we are building commercially viable net zero energy building now, but we are doing it now. But the project started 15 years ago or more. And so the first buildings weren't net zero, but it took this time, all this incremental improvement to get to where we are today. And so if you're asking me, is there any other place that are building like Masdar City? Unfortunately, not I'm aware of, or doing it the way that we are doing it. I don't have an answer why that is, because we believe that we're just working in a very practical manner, right? And to sum up this practical manner is also very, very simple. And as an architect myself, when I talk to designers who have designed buildings and completed buildings, right, and they kind of marvel at their own creation, right, I asked from an environmental point of view is that if you had to design this building again and build this building again, would you be able to fulfill the same brief requirements for the end user, right? And within the same budget, make the building 1% more energy efficient compared to what you produced? And the answer I often get is, of course I can. 1% is easy to improve if I had to do this again. Or which my response will be then, why didn't you? You see, and this is kind of the mindset of incremental improvement, because somewhere during that stage, they weren't properly focused. And I think where Masdar City differs is that during that entire stage, be it from the feasibility, the financial study and everything, we keep coming back. What's it doing to the environment? What's it doing to the environment? And just keep re-asking that question so you make all those collective moves to try and improve. And then you get to somewhere. Not where we want to be, but we get somewhere. You build it, analyze it, figure out all the things that's not working with it, and then you try to build up from there to get to where we are today. And by the way, we are still work in progress. Even though we are net zero energy, we're not net zero water, we're not net zero waste. There's still all the carbon from construction to deal with. So we are, like everyone else, work in progress. But I think it's a shame that there are not more people undertaking what we are taking. I think every country should have their own version of Masdar City so they can understand, experiment within their own climate and learn their own lessons from there.
So we're actually at the end of time, but we could take maybe one more question if there is a question. And if not, I'm coming for you. Oh, we've got one.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Frank. I want to know, is there any plan to open source the datas or the entire process you've gone through, or the knowledge you have in the construction and development of this Masdar City? Because I believe this will also help, like you said, other countries and other companies to be able to continue and add into the environmental sustainability.
First part, data, yes. Our key data is included in our ESG report, which is available on our website. In terms of methodology, we are in the process of putting some white papers together to document the process that we went through. I think as a really important part, this whole from the mindset to reworking the design process and the construction process and the challenges that we have gone through. And you had a third part. There was a third part to the question. So
What was the third part?
The third part was the framework, right? Because if you have the framework out there, it will be easier to replicate, it will be easier to improve upon.
Let me answer that last point, or speak to that last point. What we do in our buildings is readily available off the shelf. So what you see, for instance, on MC Squared, all the components, all the MEP systems are readily available off the shelf. None of it is bespoke. None of it is being ordered from abroad. The majority of what you see here is locally sourced, locally available, and we maintain it ourselves. So the point I would make is what you see there is components and elements that are readily available for anybody to use. We're not using anything that where, for instance, other cities have heavily leaned, as I said earlier, towards technology that they are developing themselves. So that's very difficult for others to replicate. What we got here is there's nothing unique or nothing here that you couldn't do yourself. Sorry, Chris, you want to add to that?
great answer.
So
Thank you. Thank you.
So what was your takeaway?
My takeaway was innovation and focus on society.
Perfect way to end this session. Thank you, everybody.